Serena Conference Center. This is NTV, and I'm Chris Higenyi. Today, this morning, we are discussing women's land rights, one of the very pertinent rights as enshrined by the various conventions and, of course, as primed by organizations, including the United Nations. But just a preamble on where the world stands when it comes to women's land rights. They are found gender equality, and it is understood that when a woman holds land, secure rights to her land, rather power dynamics shift, her dignity and the household decision-making process is primed. Strong land rights help women break the cycle of poverty in communities and improve not only their lives but the lives of those around them, especially their families and communities. The benefits of women's land rights multiply in crucial ways, both through their investment in children's education, health and well-being, water, sanitation, housing, household nutrition, and worldwide, women's land rights are key to addressing the deeply gendered issues of climate change, food security, and global health. Well, today we have experts who are going to help us understand where we stand today, and of course delve into a new campaign that aims to address women's land rights. It's being called the Stand for Her Land campaign. Very warm welcome to our guests this morning. Jimmy Ochon, the Land Rights Coordinator at Oxfam, Uganda. Many thanks for joining us. Thank you. Thanks for joining us too, Dr. Doreen Kobusinje, a facilitator at the National Land Coalition.
Thank you.
The land question and rights to land for women in Uganda, in Africa, and indeed across the world is something that is very pertinent. There is this latest campaign. We shall be delving into the state of affairs in terms of women's land rights, whether being observed or not, and if it's not the case, what can be done to ensure that that is rectified. But first, what is the Stand for Her Land campaign, very briefly?
This is a global campaign that is happening in a number of countries, Uganda inclusive, Senegal and Ghana. That's right. And many others. And majorly it is trying to look at countries that have policies in place, but also it is trying to bridge the gap between policy and implementation. So we have discovered that all these countries that I have mentioned have policies and land laws, but the actual implementation is a problem. So this campaign has come in to close that gap. Yep.
All right, so briefly elaborate the meaning of women's land rights and why it's important to have that particular discussion at the moment.
Okay. First of all, you should know that women land rights are human rights, and they are fundamental as provided for by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And to go specifically to what really these rights are in terms of land, I want to mention a few key words that may be a little bit legal or technical, but they are trying to make a meaning to. So there's what they call usus. This is a right to use land. So even a man has a right to use land, even a woman has a right, everyone has rights. So that is the number one right, a right to use land. That is a right to farm on it, a right to permanently own, to transact on it. Then there's what they call abusus, right to change management and make investment on the land. Those are all rights under land. That's right. Then there is fractus, the right to make profit and loss, or to make you an economic owner. Then we have transfer rights. That means you can transfer the right you have on land to anyone else that you need. Then you have future interests. These are also rights that you anticipate to have a few years from now. These usually are witnessed during compensations, and they are usually utilized more. But the main question, why do we need these land rights, is what I wanted to answer. Studies have shown that women with strong property and inheritance rights earn up to 3.8 times more income. So that's why it's important to have these rights. It has also been proven that children whose mothers own land are up to 33% less likely to be severely underweight. And then another research shows that families where women own more land devote more of their budget or funds to educating their children. So and then where women and property inheritance rights are stronger, women's individual savings are also up to 35%. So meaning these rights are very important. Then lastly, women who own land are up to 8 times less likely to experience domestic violence. So this is all based on studies that have been. Then lastly, the last one is children in households where women own land are up to 10% less likely to be sick. So you see how these issues on land are intertwined. So majorly that is why the women land rights are very important, and that's why we are here today. Thank you.
Now, the status of the legal and policy frameworks that are aimed at advancing women's rights in Uganda, what has government put in place to support this particular initiative with regard to women's land rights?
There are a number of things that government has done, and we would like to applaud the government for the various laws that they have enacted. I want to begin with saying thank you to the government for Parliament for recently passing the succession law, and that we are calling upon the president of the country to assent to it, and so that it is put into place. We have a number of laws that also need to be worked upon or reviewed or revised, like the Divorce and Marriage Act, which was repealed, I don't know, 20 years ago, and up to now we are struggling to have a law on marriage because it has implication on how we own, how we succeed land. So these need to be all worked upon. But I would like to currently also talk about those areas, the statuses that are not doing so well in terms of land rights. We see that in 2015, 2016, the government wanted to remove a certain article in the constitution, which is very, very instrumental to the lives of the country, of the people of the country, and that was Article 26 of the Constitution. But later it was rescinded, and the government decided that they will do more consultations. Yeah, more consultations, and we are glad the government is doing those consultations, though we are not seeing the law yet. It is almost 5 years or 3 years later, and we are not seeing the law in place yet. We know that land giveaways, land takeaways are taking on, so government needs to actually streamline this area. And then we see so the land acquisition bill is one of the bills that has been anticipated to replace that Article 26. And then we know that majorly in the courts of laws, because we don't have a Marriage and Divorce Act in operation, we are now witnessing courts of law use a lot of case law to determine court cases which somehow may be affected by the law, marriage and divorce law. So we need to have a substantive law to enable this, because while case law is one of the laws that we can rely on, but I think we need to work on this. So we have a national land policy which is very, very elaborate, and I have no problem with it. We only need to implement it to have an effective application. So for now, that's what I can say for the status on the policies and land laws in the country.
Okay. Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Jimmy Ochom. We shall be coming to you still so that we can get a greater understanding of what's happening on the ground in regards exercising of some of these rights with the women. Of course, there are challenges there. But let me come to Dr. Doreen Kopsinje. Gaps, of course, do exist when you hear Mr. Choma elaborating the implementation of progressive and gender responsive laws and policies at national level. If there is any, what exactly is being done to ensure that there is harmony between law and practice with regard to women's land rights?
Okay, thank you again. Maybe let me start by explaining more what the campaign
is about. Yeah, sure, no doubt. We'll be glad.
It is a global campaign whose objective is to strengthen women's land rights. And it is a campaign that is funded by the Jabat government, BMZ, and it's also being implemented in Uganda by UCOBAC with the National Land Coalition. The National Land Coalition is a platform of organizations that are working on land, and still our objective is to contribute to a people-centered land governance. Now, the mere fact that in Uganda only 16% of women own land, that already explains and paints a picture of the gaps that exist in the law and between the law and implementation. In Uganda, we have the spousal consent clause, which talks about if a spouse is to transact on land, they should get a written consent from the spouse. But in most cases, we have seen that men do not do this. In most cases, the women are bulldozed into accepting these transactions or actually thrown off their family land. Then the other that I want to talk about, the Constitution, the 1995 Constitution of Uganda, provides for equal freedoms and rights for both men and women. But what we see in practice, and especially when it comes to asset ownership and land in particular, it's like women are treated like second-class citizens. And this figure alone, the 16%, tells you all about this. Then we have the 1998 Land Act, which also talks about customary tenureship, customary tenure, how land should be owned, how land should be registered for people to get a certificate of customary ownership, and procedures are provided. But in practice, what is happening? Are we seeing women's names being recorded and put on these certificates? That is a question for another day. But what I have to say is the story is different from the number of names of men that appear on these certificates and those of women. Then I would also want to talk about the Succession Act. Yes, it has been passed recently, and indeed it provides for both girls and boys to inherit like their parents' property when they pass on. But in practice, what is happening? And I think very recent, in recent past, we saw in news how the deceased prime minister left his properties to girls, and how and actually the girl was made a heir, and how the country went on fire. How could it be? Where are the boys? Those are the issues that we want to talk about in this campaign. Maybe the other thing that I want to still talk about is, yes, women are regarded as, I would say, individuals of their own and those that should have rights. But in practice, most women cannot own land without the relationship that they have with their male counterparts. If it is a girl, you have to depend on your dad, for example, to give you or to show you what belongs to you. Then the other thing is about marriage. You have to be married to a man or have this relationship with a man for you to be able to access land. Then for the girls, sometimes even they have to access land through their brothers. What I'm trying to say is women cannot stand on their own, in their own right, to own land. And it has to be hinged on the relationship that exists with the men that are in their lives.
Okay. Wow, that is very sobering to understand, for example, that for a girl to be able to go out there and begin to look for or even inherit. But let me look at the new trend, for example, where women, young women, are increasingly becoming financially stable to be able to purchase their own land. Does that require, do we still see cases, for example, where they have to still find leverage on their spouses or even their brothers or their fathers to be able to acquire some of this land? I do think many young girls who have some money are getting this land. Why are they managing where others are failing? Okay,
let me briefly answer that. Then I'll get back to issues that we have to understand and what has contributed to this situation. First, women that are economically empowered can go ahead, purchase land, and put it in their names. But the question is, how many women are economically empowered? If a boy child or if a son can inherit land from their parents, why shouldn't it be the case with the girls? That is what I'm trying to say. And of course, with some research that we conducted before, we came to realize that the category of women that has access and ownership to land are the widows, and then are the women that are economically empowered and they can purchase their own land. Now, why is the situation like this? Why is the gap continuously seen between policy and implementation? I would say that the first thing is the kind of funding that goes to the land sector. This I can attribute it to the political will, but I can also attribute it to the limited resources that we have as a country, the funds that can be put in the land sector. But also my question is, if land is such important, and we describe it that way, agriculture is the backbone of the economy, and then if you have land, then your livelihood is assured, all these issues. If it is that important and it even goes to identity, why aren't we allocating resources that are needed so that people's land rights are secure, especially the women? Then also the other issue is about social norms and practices. These are deeply rooted in our lives. We believe so much in culture, and it has been believed that women cannot own land. In most communities, it stops at access. And remember, the access that I'm talking about is still hinged on the relationships that women have with their male counterparts. So this contributes to the laws are good, fine, but then the practice is different. Now, we talk about the limited knowledge that women have about their land rights. A woman cannot demand for her rights if she does not know her rights. What are you going to demand for? If a woman knew that I cannot be thrown off my husband's property after his demise, she will go and approach maybe courts of law, approach structures that are going to help her claim her land rights back. But if she doesn't know, then it's going to stop. Difficult. Yes, it's very difficult. Then the issue of the just system. It seems like the just systems works towards disfavoring women. Let's talk about the distance that women have to move to go to these courts. Let's talk about the time that the land cases take in court, and also the alleged corruption that is in this system. Then we also have to understand the intimidating nature of the courts themselves, the English that is spoken there, yes, and that will intimidate the woman to go and seek redress in case her land rights are violated. Now, let's talk about the inadequate capacity of the land actors. An example is we have, for example, the area land committees. We have the district land boards, and these are supposed to administer land. They are supposed to guarantee people's tenure security. But how are they paid? What kind of allowances do they get? Of course, this will be put back to the person that, for example, is applying for a certificate of customary ownership. And if it is a woman who is already economically incapacitated, then what do you expect? That is when we are going to see the gap between the good law that is there, but then the practice that is different. So we have to look into these issues to see that we close the gap between the good laws that we have and the actual implementation of these laws.
Oh, wow, that's very eye-opening. I'll be interested a little bit later in the program on the intimidation. I do not know whether it is actually covers all women or it's particularly the illiterate and rural women, because when you say the English and then the nature, the structure of the courts, does it apply to every woman or there's a particular kind of woman? You'll be answering that very shortly. But let me just come to you, Mr. Jimmy Ochom. The challenges that women are facing on the ground, as you hear Dr. Doreen Kobusinje espousing, are enormous. They are deeply rooted, and it is something that has to be well, not fought, but whatever campaign is aimed at uprooting those deeply seated cultural norms, beliefs, and even things that people have come to accept. For example, you find old women in the villages saying, "My son, ensure you get a son," you know. So some of those things kind of perhaps lead to this kind of thinking. But what brings about this status quo? Oxfam Uganda is, well, very well, it has the capacity to tackle, understand, and also begin the implementation process. I don't know whether whatever you're doing is going according to plan. Take us through it.
Yeah, I would like to start from a point that Dr. Businje mentioned on cultural norms. Cultural norms, yeah. And you know, one time I was in a community, and we were trying to do this community sensitization, and a statement came from one of the leaders that a property cannot own a property, and they were referring to a woman as property. That she's property, so how can she own property? So now that is how deep-rooted culture can be and how unfair it can be. Yeah, so just much. Imagine such statement is a woman staying in such a community. It will take a lot in breaking that thinking. As Oxfam and partners, we are trying as much as possible with support from government to make sure that we speak to these kind of negative cultural norms that may not be constitutionally unaccepted. But I would also like to further go on the lack of proper implementation. And still I would refer back to what Dr. Businje said on the issue of budget. If you look at the budget of the Ministry of Lands, less money is put into sensitization and implementation of the national land policy as a whole. And sometimes some of the activities that are done by the NGOs and CSOs are some of the things that they report that they have done in terms of achievements, which is a good thing. That's because right. It means that they are actually acknowledging that CSOs are really do a lot of work, but but not even less money is put in for example, area land committees. Those are the smallest area in which land administration is governed, and it is not funded. The area land committee determines how big the land is, how much the land is, and then shares the report with the recorder, and then the recorder shares. So that person who is in charge of that is not funded. It is on a voluntary basis. So if you want to do something on the land, that means you will have to really invest, because they will tell you, I have no transport, I have no. So government needs to really work on funding that area of that area. Then we know that women account for 70% of. Now I'm looking at this globally. Women account for 70% of family farming in Africa. So let us look at one of the challenges, that is land evictions, as one of the challenges. Someone will ask, how is land eviction a challenge? How is a land eviction? If you realize, when land evictions happen, the most affected are people. I mean, are women. Because they're the ones who are majorly cultivating those lands, and that affects the food, the value food, the food chain. Because if those small chunks of land are utilized to produce food, and all of a sudden they are disrupted by an eviction, massive land eviction, somehow they broke the chain of food, the food chain. They also break the food security chain. So we sometimes I like to discuss these minute issues, and I tell people. They bring out the bigger picture. Yeah, that these minute issues. For example, there's an issue of prices of food high, and then someone will begin. Okay, people will begin quoting Ukraine, Russia, and yet we have small issues that are really causing those other issues. We know that almost all the food that we eat in the country comes from small-scale farmers, and a percentage of those, the biggest percentages of are women. So if they are disrupted in terms of producing, it means the chain will be broken, and we need to support that area. And then lastly, I would like to talk about new pressures on land. The new, both national, international, you know, that are pushing developing countries like Uganda into making good decisions. On the other side, bad decisions, good decisions. Controversial decisions. Yeah, let's just say controversial decisions. Yeah. So decisions like we need to acquire as much we need to avail land to investors as much as possible so that we can support the middle income status that we of course promised to the citizens of the country. So in that sense, we are going to see many people affected because of certain decisions that government is making, which are not bad. They are very okay, but I think they should be done in a way that is procedural and of course follow the law to the dot as provided for in the country. Yeah, that's what I can say for now. Thank you.
Well, interesting. Talk about following the law. The other day we were having a discussion and a gentleman said there is rule of law and then rule by law. There are so many legal frameworks surrounding land, and many of the policies that are rolled out are required to be implemented, executed by people. And many times you find that women are affected. I don't know whether there is harmony between the reality on the ground and the legal frameworks that are put in place.
I would not want to completely rubbish the fact that indeed in some areas and in some incidences we have seen that the rule of law has prevailed. Yes, the rule of law has prevailed. For private individuals you see it a lot. But we are finding challenges in the rule of law when it comes to land of significance, can I say?
Prime land,
important land, big land. The rule of law does not seem to work there because that's where the problem is. So you find that as a normal person, me as Jimmy Ochom, if I have a land issue, I can guarantee you that if I go through the system of court, I may easily get justice. But when it comes to a poor woman, as she said, court is regarded as a place where the intellectuals are only, and the English they speak is not. It does not really give a woman chance to be able to have justice. But what I'm saying is women are finding it difficult to have justice in the land sector, in issues of to do with that, especially when land is really prime land that is of a certain interest to them. Yes, and we need to improve this. All, as the Constitution says, we are all equal and we're supposed to be treated equally. And I believe that it doesn't matter where the land is or who the person is on that land. I think everyone must be respected when it comes to compensation. Either you're a woman, or you're a man, or you're a poor man. I think everyone should be respected in that capacity.
Dr. Doreen Kopsinje, that's an issue that I think the Stand for Her Land campaign envisions, especially regarding the grassroots women. How do you intend, or how does this campaign intend to achieve that specifically, and the rollout for the grassroots women to be able to access the justice that they need, but most importantly to address the issues that affect them in the search and being able to take on the land rights movement?
Okay. As the campaign, we want to make big strides towards gender equality in asset ownership. We want to see more women own, access and utilize land. As I said before, the percentage is only 16. So what would it hurt if we see the percentage going to maybe 40%? Because we are talking about a big population. We all know women are the majority in this country. But we also know that women are the primary users of land, women are the caretakers. Women provide and fend for their families.
That's right.
So if we improve tenure security for a majority of women, it's going to translate into national development, and that is for sure. We plan to be co-implementers with government. We understand that government is the duty bearer when it comes to land governance, and we are saying as a campaign we are coming in to see that resources are allocated to the land sector so that those that are charged with providing land services have money and they can provide this. We want to see a shift in the social norms. Of course, this is something that can take a long time, but the campaign is for 5 years. So we believe that within these 5 years, we will have seen a difference. We want to see more men advocating for their women to own land. For
That's
brothers to say, my sister should own land. For husbands to believe that their wives should actually own land. And the other thing that we want to do as a campaign is we want to see that women have greater legal literacy and agency when it comes to land governance. Do women know their land rights? After knowing their land rights, can they demand for them? Because if someone knows, if a woman is equipped with this knowledge, then she's in a better position to demand what has been denied to her. But most important is we are going to see more grassroots organizations being part of this campaign, and then demanding for their land rights. And what we are saying, the grassroots women are the real owners, they are the real users, and they are the ones that benefit most if their tenure is secured. And what we are saying is we need to see more of these women in this campaign. And the issue is if we calculate this spirit, then we are going to see that even after the campaign is done, the spirit will continue and we shall lead to some sort of sustainability. Then the other issue that I want to talk about is this campaign, we are sort of building a movement. And this is something that cannot die even after the end. We all know that women's land rights are pertinent and they are very important. And if we contribute to this, then we are bringing so many people, organizations and women on board to be able to demand and secure their tenure rights. And then also what we are going to do is identify communities which need legal intervention, and we provide those legal services. Then also the other thing that is going to be done by this campaign is to conduct research. And the kind of research that is going to help us inform the kind of advocacy that we are going to do. Let's have authentic data and information that is going to help us to advocate for more women's land rights and for the security of women's access and utilization of land.
Okay. Access to information is one of the challenges that you're going to encounter, especially when you want most of the statistics on land ownership within the land boards within the country. But the National Land Coalition, of course, has the leverage to be able to get to that. Let me just transition into the entire cost when policy and implementation fail, the huge cost to the country that kind of brings out is first and foremost something that we can't even put figures to, but I know you're the experts. Tell us.
Yeah, some of them have already been mentioned, but I'm going to try and be elaborate on them.
Yeah, sure.
One of them is land evictions. If that is the cost we are going to pay, land evictions will happen in the country, and whether we will not, in fact, the issue of whether they are legal or illegal will be up to the communities. So that is number one. Land evictions can be, let me say land corruption. It can be land eviction, land grabbing. Those are all issues that we are going to have to pay for as a country. Food insecurity. I mentioned it earlier, that the women are the top in terms of producing food in this country. We are not yet there. We are still doing mechanized farming. And if you know, most of the mechanized farming, the food is not for us. It is for the outer market. So for us, we don't get the privilege to enjoy that food that is processed, or the food that we produce in large numbers. So that means we are still, our country internally is still depending on small-scale farmers, and that is the food we eat. So that means if you decide to do massive land evictions, it means that this will be affected. Political unrest and of course civil unrest, where people are not happy about everything. Anything makes them unhappy.
Agitated.
Yeah, agitated. That's you find they're not happy generally about nothing. They are not amused about anything, and that is something that government has to pay, because it can lead to something. Poverty. Poverty is an issue that, if these policies are not followed, government will have to suffer with that. The issue of unemployment. Unemployment is one of the issues, the things that are going to come out, because you know that, as I mentioned, small-scale farmers are the backbone, and you know the small-scale farmers have women and the youth, and we are complaining about youth, but some of those youth don't even have access to land. The land that they could access is beyond their reach in terms of acquisition. Yes, and then climate change. Climate change. Now, you know that climate change has a very big impact on how we produce food. You see, we are going on cutting down trees and selling them, and selling forests to replace them with sugar canes, and we are disrupting the ecosystem. And remember, Uganda entirely depends on our seasons. And you know that these days the seasons are very unpredictable.
Rain-fed agriculture.
Yes, and you know that these days the rainfall is unpredictable. It could be an issue that people don't know the answer to. The answer is very simple. You have replaced forest with what? Sugar cane. So that affects. So you are a farmer, and you know that at this particular period of time I'm supposed to be planting this, but if you try to plant it, it is very hot, or it floods, or what. So that alone is going to bring issues of food insecurity. And then lastly, I would like to talk about, I think I mentioned it, land corruption, where accessing land services has become a business. There are some people in between there who do not allow the smooth processes as provided for by the law to happen.
They profit from chaos.
Yes, they profit from that. You can imagine doing a search is about 10,000, right? But you just try and do a search on your own, and you see how much they will ask you for. They could ask you for 30,000, 50,000, 100,000. Doing a transfer may be like 600, 400,000. But if you do it normally, they'll tell you, if you want a quick one, you have to pay this amount of money for it to move faster. Because there are some people who are benefiting from it. Yet the law is very clear. The process is very clear. You just put the needful documents, but you will not get your transfer done if you do not follow up in that manner. So these are all the issues that we are going to grapple with.
All right, very quickly, the spaces, the voice, and the power. How do we enhance the women's ability to be able to speak out, but also, most importantly, have a platform through which to address some of the challenges and constraints that could be barring them from enjoying their rights as landowners?
One of them is like this. I stand for My Land Right campaign.
That's right.
Which is one of the methods that we are going to use, or we can use, to make sure that the voices of the people in the communities are heard. We should get out of our boardrooms and stop speaking about what we should do, and start doing for the communities, because I've seen many times we're having global discussions on land, national discussions on land, but they only end in the boardrooms. So we should move out of the boardrooms and go out there and solve the issues that the people are grappling with. This campaign, as Doreen has mentioned, is going to also support in cutting out the breakages or the blockages which have been formed by access to justice, like legal representation of certain people or certain women who need it. And we think that this campaign, we are going to use this method as one of the ways that women can actually, their voices can be heard. But also, utilize the available structures, both provided for by law and those which are ad hoc. I know you know that there are some ad hoc measures that have been used. For example, we have ad hoc called the State House Land of Division. Then we have the Nakalema. So such things can also bring some changes which may not be happening because of procedure and bureaucracy. So I think just to wrap it up on community, is we will, as a Stand for Land campaign, we will create that platform where the communities can be able to engage with statuses they can't really engage with. We will try to bridge that gap by giving the communities a platform to be able to speak to maybe, let me say, ministries, Minister of Land or the President, to address some of those things, or different committees in Parliament, just to be able to hear their voices. We will create those platforms.
All right. Dr. Kobusinje, the Stand for Her Land campaign obviously and very evidently has a global reach that speaks of a firm financial footing that enhances your capacity to do the job. However, interventions have been going on and there are processes that are in motion to be able to address the issues you perhaps want to enhance. How is this going to blend into these existing interventions to avoid the tendency, and I must be very particular here, the African tendency for the left hand not to know what the right hand is up to?
Okay, thank you. Maybe to begin with, the Stand for Her Land campaign, we are not claiming that we are working in isolation or we are working on something that entirely new. We are building on strategies and interventions that have been done by other actors or by other interventions. And maybe what is important for us to know that the issue of women's land rights is still very important, and it needs a lot of resources and there's a lot of work to be done. So even those interventions before the Stand for Her Land campaign, or those that will come after, the thing is, it's like a drop in an ocean. The issue that we have to address is so enormous, is so huge, that we all need our efforts. We have to work together as land actors to see that we address women's land rights. Then also what I want to mention is what is unique about this campaign is we are working with a coalition. We are speaking with one voice. We want to make strong advocacy because we are united. And everyone believes that the women's land rights should be given utmost importance that it needs. Then the other thing that is different with this campaign is putting these grassroots women and grassroots organizations at the central stage. These women know their problems, know their solutions, so it's about giving them space so that they can engage with the policymakers, so that they can engage with the people that do land administration, with these structures like the Area Land Committee, so that at the end of it all, what is represented in these policies, what is done as a service to this, is a service that represents the women at the grassroots, what they exactly want, and not for us, the elite, who think that we should sit in some space and decide for what should be done for the women at the grassroots. And then also what is very important that I need to talk about is the sustainability, like I talked about this campaign. It's more of a spirit. It is something that we think it's very good, and even without funding, If someone knows their land rights, then they can go ahead and claim them. And the mere fact of involving these women, who are the beneficiaries, who are the users, and who own land. Then about the global aspect that you talked about.
That's right.
The funds are at the global stage. So we are saying, let us attract these resources. Let us attract the funds. And the issue that we've identified is the policies are good and the policies are there. But the issue is with the funding of the land sector, with the money that is needed for these different land sectors to provide land services. Then also we have a possibility to learn from this campaign. Like we said, it's in Senegal, it is in Ethiopia. We can see what they are doing right, how they have maneuvered through some of these challenges that women face. And we can bring those ideas here in Uganda. We can learn from their challenges, but we can also learn from their successes.
That's right.
And then the issue with the global stage is we need to create visibility and publicity. Let's make noise until everyone knows that the rights of women to land, it's not charity. It is a human right. And when we give these rights to women, we are not doing them a favor, but it is a right that they should enjoy as individuals. This is what this campaign is all about. And also at the international level is, we have international regulations that work towards improving women's land rights. We bring them to Uganda, let them be disseminated and localized at the national level. What does that mean? We are going to hold our government accountable.
That's
when
right.
we see that they are part of these international instruments and actually they are not delivering on them. So if we know, then it is more of reminding and holding the government accountable that we need women's land rights to be put at the central stage.
Okay, Dr. Dorina Kobsinje, many thanks for that perspective. We are nearing the final bend of this special broadcast on Stand for Her Land campaign that is, of course, espousing the issues on the ground with regard to women's land rights. I'll give each of you 45 seconds for a parting shot. I'll begin with Mr. Jimmy.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to end with some statistics that will help us figure out why we are here. Studies show that 70% of family farming is in Africa, and then less than 20% of the women have full access to this land, agricultural land. 70 to 90 of the wealth in Africa is governed through land, and then less than 10% of this is owned by women. So that's why it's very important for us to have women land rights.
Doctor?
Thank you.
Yes, my point is, if Uganda's population, almost over 50% are women, then why should that also be seen in asset ownership, especially when it is land, access to land or ownership, land ownership? This 16% is really annoying and shaming. Let's embrace this campaign. Let us see that this percentage comes from 16 to 40, like how I talk about, and let us see more women in positions or in spaces where they contribute to decision making in land governance. Because if they are there, then they are going to root for decisions that are going to secure women's tenure rights. And also what is very important is if these grassroots women are given space and an opportunity to bring their issues from what we would say from their local issues to a space where decisions are made, we are going to see change. And we are going to see many men being part of this campaign and embracing the idea that even women have a right to own land.
Many thanks, Dr. Dorina Kobsinje, facilitator at the National Land Coalition, and many thanks to you too, Mr. Jimmy Ochom, the Land Rights Coordinator at Oxfam Uganda, for the very insightful perspective on women's land rights, not only in Uganda, but also some of the issues that can be benchmarked from the other countries to be able to streamline what is not right, and perhaps also be able to share with the people in those countries on how things are going on within the country. That will do it for the Stand for Her Land campaign this morning. But of course, the takeaway from it all is the men. There is need to accept, there is need to embrace the fact that women deserve their full, unequivocal rights when it comes to land ownership. It doesn't make sense for you to, for example, put your wife's name off that land title simply because you think, well, it is not hers. If you chose to marry your wife, then you chose to share just about everything.